In this video, I'm going to be talking about 7 key takeaways that I got from attending a coding bootcamp. Now, these 7 takeaways are more like life lessons than they are about coding specifically. These are meta skills. And in coaching over 300 students at Hack Reactor and watching them get jobs at companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon, I believe the traits of the most successful students are embedded into these 7 key takeaways. Okay, let's dive in. Lesson number 1 is to accept responsibility. If you're contemplating joining a coding bootcamp, you probably see coding as an avenue to solve a larger pain point in your life, whether that's fulfillment, finances, or anything else. Solving for this pain point with a career move requires dedication because it's not going to be easy. You need to be intentional. Your actions need to serve your long-term vision, and you need to be able to discern between good and bad choices. You need to be in control. But exactly how do you develop this control in your life? How do you become the type of person who makes disciplined choices? How do you become the type of person that sticks to the schedule and does what they say they were gonna do? The key is to accept responsibility. The thing about accepting responsibility is that it breeds control. Take these examples. When you accept that your habit of overeating has caused you to become overweight, you can begin eating healthy and lose weight. If you accept that you have a tendency to escape with alcohol and that has led you to a drinking problem, you can begin to curb your alcohol intake by coping with stress in other ways. If you accept that your habit of overworking has caused marital problems, you can choose to spend time with your spouse instead of work to begin healing your marriage. Every behavioral shift starts with the acceptance that your past actions have led you to an undesirable place in the present. This also implies the belief that your present will influence your future. You see, a coding bootcamp will force you to accept responsibility because they can't guarantee you a specific outcome. While most bootcamps will do their best to support you, you must recognize that ultimately you are responsible for your own results. Realistically speaking, no one can guarantee a specific outcome for you anyways. Everyone graduates with different levels of knowledge, experience, and skills. This is an obvious fact. In other words, what you get out of the program is what you put into the program. And this can freak some people out because it's scary to be on the hook for your own success. But being on the hook for your own success means your success isn't dependent on someone else. This is also a liberating realization. Your success is not dependent on your current situation or your past situation. What matters is the actions that you take starting from today. You're in control. Okay, so lesson number 2 is to believe that you can learn. I can vividly recall some students at Hack Reactor being disappointed in the program because the material was impossible to finish in the allotted time. And I would tell them bluntly, the curriculum was designed to be difficult. Getting students through all the material is not the primary objective. Our primary objective is to get you to become coders who believe in their own capacity to learn. Drink from a new fire hose every 2 days, we would tell them. We gave them assignments that included way too many technical topics to be understood well in the allotted time frame. We also outlined bare minimum requirements to give them some goalposts so that they understood where to frame the learning. Then we challenged them to finish and understand as much as they can within 48 hours. We called these the 2-day sprints. Students would then repeat this 2-day process for 6 weeks, where we covered a variety of topics like computer science fundamentals and web development principles. Is this really the most effective way to learn? Understandably, some students were skeptical and asked this question. I'll be the first to admit that this method is not the most effective for transmitting knowledge from one brain to another. But thankfully, knowledge transmission is only about the first 10% of your learning. It's in the rest of this learning where you actually internalize how things work so that you don't forget how to do things later. And giving students the opportunity to actually try hands-on to see how things work is the best way to learn. In other words, you learn by doing, not by sitting in a lecture. If you do this for 6 weeks straight, navigating ambiguity, breaking down complex problems, and seeing yourself progress, you begin to develop confidence in your own capacity to learn. And once you start believing in your own ability to learn, there's no stopping you. Lesson number 3 is to remember what learning feels like. Here's a quick story from a few years ago. My son had just turned 1 around that time. He'd been working his way up to standing up against the coffee table, letting go, and taking a few steps on his own. This particular afternoon looked really promising. Although his legs were still a bit wobbly, he was getting closer to finding footing and balance without holding on to anything. He stood up against the coffee table, let go, and led with one foot in front of the other. And usually he'd lose balance after 1 or 2 steps. But he took a second step and he stayed. And then he took a third, and then he took a fourth. I was ecstatic. He took his 5th step, then he took his 6th step. By the end of that night, he was walking around our apartment with a big grin on his face. He just couldn't get enough of this walking thing. He was unstoppable. This is the story I like to remember when thinking about the difficulty of learning new things. Learning is not supposed to be easy. Just like how a baby can barely stand on his feet, let alone walk, coding feels similarly slow and painful at first. You can't debug anything quickly. You have to Google the meaning of each and every line, and all you have to show for your work is a few contrived snippets of code that no one is impressed by. Learning feels really hard because you always start out at the slowest part of your growth curve. The process of learning starts out with pain and agony. Coding bootcamps will drill this into you by repeatedly giving you novel challenges that seem impossible to solve at first sight. Every challenge will start out feeling painful, and that's okay. It's to be expected. Just because it feels hard at first doesn't mean it's impossible. Look no further than the thousands of graduates that have come before you who have eventually made it into industry. A coding bootcamp will force you to travel this growth curve. It'll teach you not to be demoralized at the first sign of difficulty, and this is an immensely valuable skill in life and in programming. Lesson number 4 is to set aside time. How hard is it to learn programming by yourself? You see, it's not impossible, but you have to be savvy with how you study. It's not enough to muster up willpower or have a list of things to study or commit to doing X hours a day. There's a lot more to environment design that people underestimate when it comes to learning effectively. A central key component to environment design is to set aside time. If you're looking to self-study, you're going to face these challenges. You'll have to come up with a schedule for yourself and then communicate with others why this time is important. You have no social accountability baked in unless you find an accountability partner. And there's no financial accountability. There's no strong disincentive to slack off. Coding bootcamps triangulate a 3-part solution to this problem. A schedule is already laid out for you and its purpose is crystal clear: to get you a job in the industry. Social accountability is built into the cohort as well as the teacher-student relationship. And there's obviously a strong financial disincentive to start slacking off. These programs are usually a pretty steep investment. The biggest trick to getting better at anything is to make it likely that you'll commit and stick with the commitment. Coding bootcamps enable you to say no to other things so that you can say yes to coding. That's how they set aside time for you. Lesson number 5 is to protect your focus. The last lesson was about setting aside time. What I didn't tell you was that it has a twin brother: protect your focus. The best coding bootcamps are constructed around the central pillar of optimizing your learning environment. They do this because they know that the practice, or the actual act of coding, is what leads people to learn. Learning occurs precisely when you're intertwined into the depths of a problem. But in order to get there, you have to have the time and focus and not allow your train of thought to get interrupted. You must eliminate distractions ruthlessly and protect your focus. Some coding bootcamps even enforce this by using policies like no phones during pair programming. If setting aside time is about the quantity of time that you have, protecting your focus is about making that time effective. And these fundamentals are not unique to coding. Your ability to set aside time and stay focused dictates your effectiveness at anything. Lesson number 6 is to practice deliberately. Possibly the most underrated skill is the ability to discern good and bad practice. It's the secret sauce and the key to unlocking your potential in any pursuit. Here's how a coding bootcamp will teach you this lesson. There are 2 kinds of practice: practice and deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is effective practice. Everything else, as a non-deliberate practice, is just masquerading as practice and not actually serving the purpose of making us better. Non-deliberate practice might look like peeking at your phone every few minutes while you're trying to code. Or it might look like a college student sitting in a library but just browsing Facebook all day. Don't kid yourself. Just because you're sitting in front of a computer and typing into a code editor, it doesn't mean that you're learning. Deliberate practice is about understanding where your own gaps in skill and understanding are, and catering your practice to fill those gaps. A coding bootcamp will teach you how to practice deliberately by giving you topics in a reasonable order. And those challenges will be designed to teach you a specific skill. This kind of deliberate allocation of time and focus on the most important challenges you should be facing as a learner helps you move forward quickly. Lesson number 7 is to teach what you know. Some coding bootcamps will nudge you to start a blog. I followed this advice and started a technical blog on programming back when I was a student at Hack Reactor, and it taught me several key lessons. First, technical topics are best understood when you go through the work of communicating it to someone else. Writing about something makes you realize just how unclear some things are in your own head. You acquire the skill of turning your vague mental ideas into crystal clear explanations of how things work. The thing about teaching is that the teacher learns more than the student in the process of transmitting the knowledge. And that's because there's two kinds of teaching. One is to convey a message or an idea from one brain to another. This is knowledge transmission. And the second way of teaching is to show the ropes for someone else so that they can eventually learn to climb and develop themselves. The first is the kind that is stereotypically understood as the teacher-student relationship. The second kind is the homework assignments, the project work, and where the real learning actually happens. The first part benefits the teacher the most because the teacher has the most difficult task of communicating an idea clearly. The second kind of teaching benefits the students the most because the student has the difficult task of actually completing the challenges and learning things for themselves. And I want you to notice a theme here. The more difficult something is, the more likely it is that you'll learn something and take away something valuable from that experience. As an effective learner, you want to be the teacher who conveys coherent messages to others, and you want to be the student that actively shows up and participates in the process of developing themselves. This is why starting a blog on technical topics that you learn along the way is a great idea. Learn to be a teacher and share what you know. In conclusion, there are meta lessons in anything that we do in life. Look no further than your current job or your current situation. There's probably a few key insights that you're going to walk away with that can serve you for the rest of your life. Do whatever you can to hold on to these lessons. It could be publicly, like on a blog or on a YouTube video like I did here, or it could be in a private journal. Make it a practice to realize, acknowledge, and appreciate everything that your past and current situation has to offer you. It's only when you realize the value of your past that you can make use of it and let it serve you going forward. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it. If you found this information useful, give me a like and subscribe, and check out my coding career newsletter, thecommit.dev. I'll leave a link in the description below. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.